All right, Nico, can you say, welcome to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies?
It's a happy episode. Happy babies. Dad, I don't sound like that anymore.
I know, but you were only 3 years old when you did that, and you were cute, and people love it. Do you want to try it again?
Sure. Healthy babies.
No, it's Healthy Births, Happy Babies.
Happy births, healthy babies.
Healthy Births, Happy Babies.
Happy births.
Oh, no. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies. I'm Dr. Jay Warren, your host. I'm also a prenatal and pediatric chiropractor here in San Diego. And wasn't that intro fun? Nico overheard me doing some editing and overheard that intro that I've been using for years. So many of you have reached out and said that you just love hearing his voice. And one mom even told me that, when she's listening to episodes in the car with her kids, like all the kids in the back seat say that along with Nico. But he overheard that and we re-recorded something new. So you can still not get it right, which is funny. So 4 years have passed. He's 7. Maybe in 4 years we'll nail it. But anyway, I'm going to keep that in for a while. But as fun and funny as that intro was, this episode is going to be fun and funny as well, because my guest today is Amy Bayer. She's a former client of mine. I saw her in her 3rd pregnancy at the CAP Wellness Center, helping her achieve her VBAC. And she's going to describe all 4 of her births. So as I said, I saw her in the 3rd. She rocked a VBAC, and she had a birth after that, but the previous 2 were less than optimal, we could say. She's going to tell you the whole story of how each and every one got better and better as they went. Actually, the first 2, super long labor, over 50 hours, I believe, was a labor, but she had a vaginal birth. Second one, long labor again, resulting in a C-section. And then she, getting pregnant the 3rd time, said, all right, I got to do different. She switched providers. She took classes. She did chiropractic, acupuncture. She was doing all kinds of things for herself. And then rocked the VBAC. And then 4th pregnancy and birth did even better. And she, as you're going to be able to see, is super fun. I loved working with her. I loved having this conversation with her because not only is she fun and funny, but she's super knowledgeable and she's a great teacher. She, came from a barre method instructor background and learned tons about pelvic floor, and now educates totally differently on heading into birth around pelvic floor and tightening versus releasing. And then also as a nutritionist, she learned tons about pregnancy and postpartum. This is going to focus more on the birth story because it's really powerful. It's a really great example of what's possible for any woman that takes charge and really educates herself and does the work. And that's what we really advocate with all of the clients we see in the CAP Wellness Center, one-on-one, but then also it's what this podcast is all about as well. So I'm going to switch to our conversation in just a little bit after this message, and we'll get right to it. All right, Amy, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, it's been a while since we've talked, aside from just what we were mentioning before we got on the recording here. But you had reached out to me a little while ago, kind of sharing all kinds of updates since we'd seen each other before. And you want to share your birth story. And I'm really happy that 1, you reached out, and 2, that you're willing to share your journey, because it's quite a journey. 4 kids, 4 very different births, and you learn so much along the way. And I just really appreciate you sitting down and talking with me today for our listeners to learn from what your experience has been. So just want to say that right from the get-go before we jump in.
Yeah, I'm excited to share. I think I've come a long ways, and I'm hopeful that moms will learn a lot from my story.
Yeah, you've come a long ways from the first birth. Let's start there. First birth was a doozy.
Yeah.
Tell us
So
about that.
my first kid was a little boy born in 2014, and I had a pretty uneventful pregnancy with him. I was working out a lot, like every single day, doing a lot of bar workouts, a lot of isometric movements, and I was in really good shape. Like I think I only gained like 22 pounds, and I felt really good. Like I still had like abs in front of my like belly, like, and so I was feeling really, really good. And I went to like 39 plus 3, and there was like this blood moon, and I was like, oh, it's totally gonna happen. I started having contractions, and I'm like, yes, this is gonna be great. Like he's finally here. And then like all night I had contractions like maybe 13 or 15 minutes apart. And then by the morning they sort of slowed down, and we were like, okay, well, my parents are out in California. We were living in Chicago at the time. But like my parents are out in California. We might want to let them know that they might want to fly out here in the next couple of days. They were kind of waiting. So we call them, and they're like, oh, we'll come right now. And I'm like, great. And so then we jumped up, and I'm like, I'm in labor. And so we like cleaned the house and vacuumed, and we're like finishing putting shelves in the guest room and making cookies. And like, and I'm like, wow, my contractions are only coming like every 20 minutes. And I was like so amped. Like I had all this adrenaline, just my parents are coming down. I'm about to have a baby. I'm so excited. And I think that also slowed it down. That was like a part of the slowdown of it.
Yeah.
And so so then I decided, okay, I should lay down. And every time I had a contraction, I would just sort of tighten up. Like that was just my natural response as someone who like grew up. I grew up doing gymnastics. I had done a lot of fitness. Like whenever there's like a challenge or something, you always tighten your abs, right? Like it's like you just kind of hold on. And so every contraction, I would just sort of tighten. And it was like, okay, I'm just gonna grit through this. And so they arrived that afternoon. So we drove to O'Hare, we're at the airport. I'm like, hey, mom and dad, like, oh, just a minute, I'm gonna have a contraction. I'm gonna kind of gritting and like, and then
You
we
went to the
just
airport and picked up your parents?
yeah, I like they pulled up right as I had a contract, or we pulled up to the curb like right as I had a contraction, and I'm like, oh hey guys, oh just a minute, and they're like, oh the baby's coming, we're so excited, and everybody was so excited, and then but meanwhile I'm just like amped and tight and just like not really knowing how to go through contractions. Like I did a Lamaze class, but it wasn't really helpful because then I was breathing like like I just kind of made myself lightheaded. I didn't know what I was doing to begin with. Like I don't know, it's one of those things you don't know what you don't know, and I just hadn't prepared right. Like I just didn't know what I was doing. And so we got home, we had deep dish pizza. I'm like bouncing on the birth ball, like hanging out with them. And then they all went to bed, and I had like, okay, this is my second night in a row of like really consistent contractions all night. And again, just sort of really tightening and then trying to lay down and sleep between them. And I just kind of did the best I could, but I didn't know what was going on. And so I'd been at this now 24 hours of like pretty regular contractions, but not ramping up. We were stuck at 6 minutes apart, and I had called my OB and was like, can I come please? Like, I want to get this baby out. Like, let's do this. Right. And he was like, you're talking to me through contractions. I don't think you're ready to come to the hospital. I was like, but please. So then eventually later, like in the middle of the night that night, I was like, I just can't do this anymore. Cause they were kind of intense. And again, I didn't know how to like really breathe through them. And so we just went to the hospital, and I showed up, and I was like, can you do anything for me? And they're like, well, let's just check you. And they're like, okay, you're at 1.5 centimeters. And I was like, like 1.5 after like 30 hours ish. And I'm like, this is going to be a long journey. So I was like, can I just have anything? And they were like, well, let's give you, I don't remember what it's called. It's like something kind of narcotic. I don't know. It lasts for a couple of hours, and they gave it to me, and I swear I was high. Like I like tried to like rest through it, but I was like, this is so like weird and uncomfortable. And I just laid there. I didn't really like move. So anyway, so I finished that, and that started to wear off, and the doctor came and was like, okay, you're at like 2.5. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like 6 hours later. And I was like, this is a problem. And so then he was like, let me just wait. Like, why don't you just get up, take a shower? Like, so I got up, I took a shower, and he's like, okay, you're at 3 centimeters. We're going to let you stay. And I was like, you better let me stay. Like, this is not going well for me. And so they let me stay at the hospital. And then they decided they asked if they could break my water. And I said, I mean, do anything to help me, because I'm struggling here. Yeah. And they were like, okay, we'll break your water. And I was like, they're like, but it might ramp up pretty fast after that. Like, do you want to think about an epidural too? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I don't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I was like, yeah, let's go with an epidural first and then break my water. And then if it ramps up, I won't have to feel anything. It'll be fantastic. So I got the epidural, and they broke my water, and things progressed very slowly. And about like 6 or 7 p.m. that night, they're like, okay, now we're going to try and give you Pitocin, because you're only at like 6 centimeters. And this was like full days into the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay. So then they gave me Pitocin. They let me like up my epidural thing, and I just sort of slept, but I didn't really move that much. Like I just sort of laid there. Mm-hmm. And I think having an epidural was helpful because I wasn't tensing up. Like I wasn't tightening like I had been before, but even still I was just laying there. And so if my kid was poorly positioned, he wasn't going to come out fast, So eventually they were like, okay, this was like at 3 a.m. the next morning. So it had been like a couple of days now, like 2 full nights and then another night. And it was 3 a.m. and they were like, oh, you're finally complete. And I was like, hallelujah, because I knew I had a strong pelvic floor because I had doing Kegels for the last 9 months. And so I was like, pushing is my jam. Like now is showtime for me. So I started pushing and I pushed for 2 hours and it was pretty intense, but it wasn't like, I felt like I had control at that point. It wasn't like I was just sitting there waiting. So I pushed and I didn't tear, and he came out as an 8-pound baby and was like totally healthy and fine. But they're right at the end. They were like, he's a little twisted. We're going to vacuum suction his head. And so they did like the little suction cup thing on his head and that like turned him and the baby delivered. And he got pretty good APGAR scores, not the best. He had a little meconium in him, but it wasn't terrible. But in all, like at the end, like I remember kind of like resting my head and they were like kind of cleaning him out a little bit. And I was like, I am never doing that again. That was horrible. And my doctor looked at me and he goes, good news is it'll never be that hard again. I'm like, who says I'm having any more children? Like,
Right.
So after that, I was like, I looked at my husband. I was like, I don't know how anyone has more than one kid. Like that was a marathon.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You said it was 55 hours total?
It was 55 hours total. And like, I don't know, part of it is I called it early, like, I'm in labor when I was like kind of sort of starting instead of being like, let's wait until it's more serious. But yeah, from the beginning to the end, it was 55 hours of pretty exhausting. And I had asked them at one point, I was like, can I please just have a C-section? Like put me out of my misery. And the nurse, which I respect her now for it. I respect her so much. She looked at me and she was like, honey, that's unnecessary major surgery. Your body can do this. And so she didn't, which is really remarkable because I feel like that's not always the story that moms get.
No, especially like at that point in your labor, you would have most likely gotten a lot of advice like, hey honey, like, can we do the C-section? Let's get this thing over with. Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. I'm really grateful for her because that set me up to say, if I'm going to do this again, I can have a vaginal birth again. Like I feel like if I had a C-section first, then I might've been a little more doubtful of my ability to do it later.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right. Wow. That's amazing. So how long was it until your next baby? To your next birth?
It's so funny because I was all motivated to have another baby like a year later. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was about a year later, we started trying again. And we got pregnant. I was like, I think my son was like 15 months or something. So they're 22 months apart. They're just under 2 years apart. So I had my second one August of the next year.
And did you have, I mean, you said like right after your first was born, you're like, I'm never doing this again.
Yeah.
What changed? Was it that you like kind of forgot about it, or you were just like, all right, I'll go through that again because I get another kid out of it?
Yeah. I mean, I fell in love with my baby. Like I was like, this is awesome. Like, okay, so pregnancy is really long and birth is kind of rough, but like in my mind, I was like, I'm just gonna get an epidural next time. It won't be as hard as last time because that was my first kid. So maybe it was just a first kid experience. And in my mind, I was like, this is going to be better. It's got to be better. And I love my son. So of course, like, let's go ahead. It's worth it. And I'm just not going to think about it until we get a little closer. And then I'll just do the best I can.
Mm-hmm. Good. And was that second pregnancy just as uneventful as the first?
Yeah, generally,
Healthy,
I feel like
everything's doing all right.
Yeah, they were pretty easy. I've never had like any sort of medical issues. The only thing is I get like these really weird spider veins in my leg that look like I got like beat up. And then after my pregnancy, they go away. Like it's just I think it's from blood volume. So my pregnancy was easy. Okay. And my labor with her it started off normal. Like again, middle of the night, I started having some surges, was like, okay, maybe this is happening. But at that point I had hired a doula. And she had told me, okay, first of all, you need to slow your roll on Kegels, girl, because you're doing too many Kegels. Like, she's like, I don't want you to do one more Kegel for the rest of your pregnancy. And I was like, oh, okay. Because I had just been so tight and like really trying to do a lot of Kegels with my first. So like, okay, so I won't do as many Kegels and hopefully that'll help. And she had also said, I also think that you had a lot of adrenaline in your first labor. You had an audience and that just put you on stage. And so you were just ramped up and that will also slow your labor. And so I was like, oh really? But no one had I didn't know that with my first one. And so with this second one, when I started having surges in the middle of the night, I didn't even tell my husband. I just let it be really dark and I just tried to not get ramped up and I just stayed like super zen and was like, okay, like we can do this. I'm just gonna kind of, once it starts to get more intense, I'll wake him up, but I'm just gonna kind of lay here and see how they go. And they went from like 13 minutes apart to like 6 minutes apart. And that was like from 1 a.m. to like 7 a.m. And by 7 a.m. I was like, all right, let's call our doula. Let's get ready to go to the hospital because this is getting more intense. But again, I had been laying down the whole time instead of like getting up because I didn't want to get ramped up. So I didn't really know how to like balance my own adrenaline. Okay. So about 6 or 7 a.m., the doula showed up. She's like, let's get in the bathtub. Let's start moving. And I got in the bathtub and my water broke and it was dirty. Like it was like it looked like split pea soup. It was like this weird like consistency. And we were kind of like, that might mean that the baby has already pooped. Like, that's a little concerning. Yeah. So we decided to drive to the hospital in rush hour traffic. And so at that point,
the adrenaline levels, right?
Oh my gosh. And so I tried to stay like totally in my head. I had like those blinks, the eye mask, and I just covered my eyes and I was like, not going to think about the traffic, just going to sit here. But I was just like sitting on my butt in the car having surges. And they, at that point, were they were 2 minutes apart if I was sitting down, and they were 1 minute apart if I was standing up. And I was like, okay, so if rush hour traffic at the time was 45 minutes. So I had at least 20 contractions in the car, which are not fun contractions.
No.
And so I was like, just get me to Scripps, just get me to the hospital. So we finally pulled up, and I like ditched my husband. I was like, bye, like you can get the bag, but I didn't even like wait for him to park. I just like unbuckled, and I was like, I just have to get to the room and get my epidural. And that was like all I had my mind on, like just get an epidural, I can have a baby, it's going to be great. And so I like rushed in there, and the lady's like, hey, what kid is this? I'm like, this is my second kid. Like, can I just sit down? Because they're really close together if I'm standing up, and they're a little bit easier if I'm sitting down. And she's like, so let's just get you in your room. So they got me in my room, and I signed some papers and whatever, which is always really silly when you're like signing things and you're like, just a minute, I can't sign this, I'm about to throw up. Like, you're like, so and it's such a weird thing to be like in the hospital environment. But again, I felt safe because I knew that they would be able to help me. And so, so she checked me, and she's like, yeah, I think your baby has pooped a little bit. Like, let's keep an eye on that, but you can get your epidural. So let's just lay down. And so they like gave me my epidural, and I was like, I am so happy. I am about to have this baby. It's going to be better than last time. It's going to be so great. And then they were like, her heart rate has been dropping a little bit. Like, we're going to keep an eye on that. But my doctor came in and was like, honey, I'm really getting worried. Like, we might need to give you a C-section. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, that won't happen. Like, I've already gone through this like really worrisome long labor thing. Like, I just need to wait. And so my doula had like my legs around a peanut ball. I was laying on my side in the bed, and I had a peanut ball, and she was sort of rocking, like jiggling my hips back and forth to kind of help the baby move, which again, I hadn't really been focusing at all on her placement. I had just been focusing on managing my own adrenaline. Okay. And so I hadn't really been moving that much. And so I think that would have helped, but I didn't know it at the time.
And let me ask too, like the first labor, you had said that anytime a surge or a contraction came on, you were tightening as well. Were you doing that this time around as well with the second?
I was trying not to. Like, she had told me one of the things that she had me practice before birth was having my hands like sitting on my lap with my palms up and my hands relaxed. And she's like, try not to tense your hands. And she also said, try not to tense your jaw. Like, always be relaxing. Like, she had me do horse lips where you like kind of blow like a horse through your lips. Yeah. So just practice like relaxing my jaw, relaxing my mouth, because she said your cervix mirrors your lips. And so if you have tight lips, then you have a tight cervix. You just need to relax. So I had been trying to do that. Which isn't always easy if you're laying down. Like, again, because I wasn't moving, I wasn't really managing it as well as I could. So I was kind of like trying not to grab, but I was like holding onto the bed frame at home, like, blah, like, but like trying to, relax my pelvic floor, but I'm still like tensing my hands. So it's like this tension in me of like, I know I need to relax, but I don't really know how to find that point.
Sure. But you got a lot more tools this time, it sounds like.
I did. Yes, I definitely learned a lot at that point. And so right. I wasn't amped on adrenaline. I was really relaxed. We had the peanut ball. She was trying to jiggle me. And the doctor, she's like, I'm going to be back in 40 minutes. And if that baby's heart rate doesn't stop dropping with like every couple contractions, then I think we should just give you a C-section. And so then I like burst into tears, and you're only allowed to have 2 people with you at the hospital. So my mom was at home, like watching my son. So I called my mom because she had a C-section. I was like, Mom, I'm going to have a C-section. Like, oh my gosh, it's going to be terrible. And I'm like peppering my doula with all these questions, like, am I gonna ever wear a bikini and not have it show again? Like, I'm being all vain, of course, in this like terribly like important moment. I'm like all vain about it. But anyway, so I asked her, and they gave me a lot of support and a lot of confidence. But then they took me they got my husband dressed in like the gear for the operating room. They took me in there, and it was cold, and I didn't expect to be like freezing, but it's like this really weird, almost vulnerable thing where you're like naked in a really bright room with a bunch of people, and it's freezing. Like, it was so not the birth experience that I was expecting.
Yeah.
It was so like unnatural that I just kind of looked around and was like, are you kidding? I'm gonna have a baby like this? Like, it wasn't like this zen, like aromatherapy, dark room kind of thing that I had hoped for.
Right.
And so they gave me a C-section, and it wasn't incredibly painful. Like, I had a good set of meds, but I was shivering just like you are with like a regular labor, like the same like shivering where you're in transition and your body's kind of wobbly, and like that all was really normal because it had been a physiological start. Like, it started on its own, my labor. And so they took her out, and they said, okay, she needs to go to the NICU because she has a fever right now, because I think that was because of the meconium that she had swallowed. And so they took her to the NICU, and they gave her some stuff, and she was really, really healthy. Like, after that, the neonatologist was like, she doesn't need to be in here. Like, she looks really good, but they had to monitor her for 48 hours because of her fever.
And she didn't aspirate any of the meconium or anything and take it into her lungs?
I think she did, and they suctioned her, but she recovered really quickly. So she got a really low APGAR score, but then she was fine.
Okay, good,
So,
good.
yeah, but that was a little bit traumatic too, because they took her away. Like it was almost like I felt for every C-section mom that had their babies like be taken to the NICU, because it was a very vulnerable thing. It was like I had grown her and she was mine, but unlike my first birth, when they gave me my kid, I didn't get my kid. Like, so it's just really weird of like, where'd you go? Like part of me is gone now.
Right.
So that was, I think, the most traumatic point for me. And that became a turning point for me, where I was like, I'm never doing this again. Either I'm going to be done having kids or something serious has to change.
Okay. And did you think, I mean, had you had a picture in your life of having more than 2 kids and that you were at conflict with that? Or were you fine with like, all right, if that's the way it's going to be, I ain't doing it again?
Yeah. Well, I had always wanted 4.
You had, okay.
And, yeah, my husband, I always wanted 4 kids. And I thought, okay, maybe if I have to do a C-section again, maybe then I'll just find the doctor who does it the most gentle of any doctor, and we'll just try to make it as least painful as possible. And I'll just quit at 3.
Right.
So, but in my heart, that was the death of a vision, like a death of a dream, because it was something that I had wanted. And I felt like I had failed to do what I wanted. And I know it wasn't, my body wasn't broken, but it felt like that at the time. It felt like a part of me, because it was like the vision that I had for our family and for our future. And it felt like my body's fault. That was like the death of the vision. So I really had to grapple with that as a post C-section mom. It's like, can I ever birth vaginally again? I don't know. Will I be able to? I don't know. Is this going to be hard for me always? Like I've had 2 horrible births so far. Like, is it always going to be like this? That was the question. I was really wrestling with that.
Right. Did you, at that point, did you know about VBAC and that was possibly an option? Was that something in the possibility of maybe I can do vaginal birth again? Because you talked about it just now, but some women don't just think, oh, I had a C-section, now I'm always going to have a C-section, and VBAC doesn't really enter into their possibility.
Yeah, in my mind, I don't think I really had done any research about it, but in my mind, I thought I just never want to have a C-section again. So it's going to have to come out my vagina because it's not coming out my stomach.
Right.
In my head, that's how I saw it. And so I knew that people did that. And so I just knew that I had to find a doctor who knew how to help me with that.
Okay. And so then let's go to the 3rd birth. Like what gap was there in between 2nd and 3rd?
My 2nd and 3rd are 27 months apart. So just over 2 years apart.
Okay. All right.
So it's similar, about 18 months after that, I got pregnant, but it was a surprise. Cause again, I was like, I'm never doing that again. Like I need lots of time if I'm going to be able to do this.
Okay.
And it was a surprise, which I'm thankful for fertility. I'm not complaining because I know a lot of women struggle with that. But it was a surprise. And at that point, that pregnancy kicked off a healing journey that I had been delaying, I think, of like dealing with my C-section. And so being pregnant again and having faced a traumatic birth, going forward, looking at it and saying, I can do this again. I just need the tools to do it. And so I did a lot of journaling. I bought like a Bible study about being brave and like all the people in the Bible who were really brave. And I talked to Dr. Cap. I got a new doctor and I said, I need your help because I want to do this right. And I started going to see you. I started seeing chiropractor. I saw an acupuncturist. I downloaded Hypno Babies. They have a VBAC track. And so I listened to that as often as I could, like going to sleep at night, which admittedly, I don't know how moms do it. I always fall asleep listening to that. Like I've listened to it all the way through like once or twice, but like pretty much always fall asleep. So I did Hypno Babies, and I downloaded the daily essentials from the Spinning Babies website.
Okay.
That video. And that started this realization, especially as I was listening to your podcast, I was like, oh, it was like a light bulb went on. I was like, all of a sudden I realized everything that I had done that I thought I was doing right in my first pregnancy, with getting super strong and working out all the time and all these isometric movements and getting a really, really tight pelvic floor. It was like this light bulb went on. I realized, oh, if you want to have your baby come out easy, then you have to make space for your baby.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm not blaming anyone, but I had no idea. I don't know why that didn't occur to me. And I think a lot of moms will say like, oh, my pelvis is misshapen, so I can only have C-sections, or I'm not very big, and so I can only have C-sections, or my births are horrible, or they're hard, or they're long. And I looked at myself and I said, that's not going to be my story again. I just have to learn how to do it right. And so I listened to one podcast. I don't even remember which one it was because I've listened to like hundreds of yours because I love it. But I think Dr. Cap said something along the lines of, if you want a different experience, you need to re-educate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was exactly, I wanted it so badly, a different experience. And so I was like mind, body, and soul all into figuring out how I was going to be successful at a VBAC. And I said, and so some people say like, if you're setting a really ambitious goal, you can also write like a pre-mortem, like the worst case scenario, you write that out and that helps you. So you say, okay, worst case scenario, I have a C-section again. Worst case scenario, the baby goes to the NICU again, or even worst case scenario, she dies. Okay, so let's talk about that. So my husband and I talked through that. We talked through if I had a C-section again. We talked through if she had to be in the NICU again, whatever. And then I brought that to Dr. Cap and I said, hey, I know that if I need to have a C-section again, you do what's called a gentle C-section. And I think that that will help me, knowing, one, that you're going to be gentle, and two, that I have a doctor who believes in me enough that he would at least talk me through it beforehand. So I felt some semblance of control, which would take away the trauma.
Right. Now, did you find Dr. Cap because you were looking for gentle cesarean, or were you looking for a VBAC friendly OB, or both?
I actually had a
He
friend.
is both, but
It is
I
both.
didn't know which one was on your radar.
My first one was a friend had just she'd been posting online about this great doctor, Dr. Kapishnakis. He's amazing. And he delivered my baby breech, and my baby was born with like one leg out and like kind of in the splits. And I was like, okay, if that's the kind of person that's willing to work with you, like I want that person on my team. And I think that was really key for me. And I think it is key for a lot of moms to find a provider that makes them supported, but also safe. And so it's not like he was just saying like, oh, you can totally do it. He was saying, you're capable of doing it. And if it doesn't happen, I know what to do, because I've helped people give birth 2,000 times. By the time I got there, he had already done 2,000 babies. Right. And so I said in my mind, okay, so I'm safe with you. We have a contingency plan, right? Like emergency C-section, but gentle C-section is my contingency plan. And you're supportive of me trying, which is my dream, which I've been really, really wanting. And so he was my best shot. And so now we live like 2 hours from him, and I was willing to drive. And so I drove 2 hours for every appointment. And my parents live not that far. And so we ended up staying with my parents, like not that, like probably about 39 weeks, because I assumed I wouldn't go early. And we stayed with my parents, and we did what we have to do to have him be my doctor, because I think having the right team is the beginning point of success.
Right. And, to back up to a point you made too, was not only was he supportive of what the vision you had for that birth, and if it didn't go that way, he was there and he knew what to do. But also what you had said was that he's like, all right, if you want this, like you got to train for it, and you got to re-educate yourself. So he was trying to empower you to like, all right, you're not just going to show up on that day with me being different. It's like, you're going to be doing all these things differently during your pregnancy, and kudos to you. Like you did it. Yeah, I really did. Like I said, I had to train mind, body, and soul for that next birth, because I wanted so badly a different experience. And so I think moms can do that. I think it's really within reach. And so the keys for me were spinning babies was a big difference from what I had been doing. And I had done some workouts, lots of walking, more workouts with like bigger lunges and squats. And I still could lift weights with my arms, but I wasn't doing crunches. I wasn't doing planks. I wasn't doing isometric holds where I was just tight. Because like bar workouts, they're great because they're low impact and they're super great for toning, but they're not great for pelvic mobility, because it's all of it is core and pelvis and your outer hips. And it's all about tightening. And so all those ligaments become really tight. So you look darn good in leggings, but you're not made to have your hips flex around a baby's head. Right.
And so I did. Go ahead.
So that training wasn't bar, CrossFit, like running thing. It was more of training for birth and doing the openings and lengthenings, as well as like you had mentioned the daily essentials of the spinning babies.
Yeah. I did spinning babies. I did walking. I did chiropractic. I was really consistent, especially in my third trimester with that. I drank a lot of raspberry leaf tea, which before I had been like in my mind, I'm like, I'm not doing that. That tastes nasty, but I like it if it's iced. And so I learned how to do it. So I drank a lot of raspberry tea, and they also say that dates are really helpful. And before I was like, dates are too sweet for me. I can't do it. And this time I was like, I'm doing everything I can. And so I ate all my dates at the end of my pregnancy. I was like having dates in my smoothies and dates in my yogurt and dates in my dessert. Like it was like dates all day long. So I did that. And like I said, I did hypno babies as well. I really did that. And I did, and this is something that I hadn't realized and I think would have helped me before. I had just been like a pregnant lady. You sit on the couch, you watch your show at the end of the night, you're exhausted, your feet are swollen, and I would just sort of recline. And I didn't know that wasn't helpful. And so in my third pregnancy, I stopped slouching. I stopped leaning back on the couch. And if I was watching something, I would only lay on my left side, or I would sit up like on a birth ball. And that helped me with positioning, because then she wasn't like, I had my kids are always, they were just in my back. And so my son was just kind of in my back. And so with my third, she sort of lived more in the front side of my body, which was a better thing for positioning for birth.
Right.
But I didn't know that. And so I stopped slouching and I changed the way I ate. But the thing is, I think the fear, and this is a fear, I think in a lot of fit moms, is that I was because I wasn't doing all these intense workouts, that I was going to get fat. And so I was worried that I was like letting myself go for the sake of this one day of this like easier labor. And so I just really focused on eating really healthy and giving my body what it needed and just trusting the process. And so instead, I wasn't eating chocolate cake. I wasn't eating junk because I knew I wanted to nourish her really well. But also I wasn't worrying about the number on the scale as much as I was before. I wasn't worried about being toned. I wasn't worried about being strong. I was worried about being flexible. And I bounced back just about the same as I had with the other two.
Fantastic.
So yeah, so that was really encouraging for me. So yeah, her birth.
Yes.
So I got there, 40 plus at my due date, I had like a dance party with myself, which became my tradition after that. And if I ever have any more kids, I'm sure I'll do it again. So got to my due date and was like, just so proud of myself. And my favorite is when I have a due date on a Sunday. This has happened twice to me now, cause then I see people at church and they're like, hey, when are you due? I'm like, today. And they all like have this, oh my gosh, face, like, don't fall over. Like, it like
Right.
people out.
They slowly move away from you.
Right, like, are you okay? Like, are you feeling okay? Like, you're not gonna like break your water on me, right? Like, so that was funny. So anyway, so I had like a dance party with myself. I was my husband was putting the other kids down and just put on some music in my head, and it was all like Latin kind of salsa, like shake your booty kind of thing. And so I was just doing dishes on my due date, like dancing the baby out. And then the next day, like in the middle of the day, I started having like on and off surges, but I was like, no, these are more serious than Braxton Hicks. And I took my kids on a walk. And so I was walking hills and I was doing some curb walking and like trying to kind of just get things moving without calling it labor yet, because I knew from my first, if you start calling it labor really early, then it feels like a really, really long time.
Yeah.
So I just kind of did curb walking. I didn't really tell my husband. And then finally in the evening, it started getting more intense. And another thing that we added, which I hope is appropriate for your podcast, my doula was like, you should, if you haven't broken your water, you should have sex when you're in labor. Like if you can handle it, you should do it. Mm-hmm. And so we were like, all right, let's do it. And I felt bad for my husband because he was like, I'm sorry. And I was like, we're just going to do it. So I had a few surges while we did it, and we did it. And that really ramped things up, like really ramped it up. And so that was probably like in the evening. And then later that evening I got in the shower and I did like 30 minutes or something in the shower. And then I got in my parents' hot tub and we had set it so it wasn't too hot. Mm-hmm. And I was in there for 2 hours. And that was really helpful for me because I got in and I was like, why didn't I do this earlier? I feel amazing. Like, and because there's like seats in the hot tub, I could put my hands and sort of like just lean forward. And so I was just leaning forward and kind of just holding my belly in front of me. And she was like kind of sloshing in the water, and that was great. And then it started to ramp up even more. And this was about 12:30 in the morning at this point. I was like, all right, let's get out. So I rinsed off, I got dressed, and he was like, why don't we go to the hospital? And I was like, oh, those are the best words I've ever heard. Like, let's do it. Like, I made it through the hardest part and I want to get an epidural. So I got there and they were like, how many babies is this? I'm like, this is my third baby. It's a VBAC, but I want you to keep me in a positive space. So please don't say anything negative. I'm all about like, all I just need from you right now is support, because I can do this. I know I can do this because I had been training for this. And so they were awesome, and they checked me and they were like, all right, hon, you're at 6 centimeters. And I was like, woohoo! Because again, I had been 1 centimeter with my first one, 4 centimeters with my second one. So by my third, to get to 6 centimeters on my own without any help, like I was really proud of myself. And some moms move faster than others. And in my history, I hadn't moved fast. So I was like freaking amped. So I was really proud of myself. And then I was like, but can I please get an epidural? And so they gave me my epidural and I lay down. And with that one, I was on my side with my legs parallel with a pillow between them. For a couple of hours. And then again, they flip you so your epidural doesn't like just cover one side. And so they flipped me a few times. And then about 3 a.m., the midwife came in and said, can I break your water? And she said, Dr. Cap talked to me and we suggest that this might be a good thing to sort of finish you out, because I had stalled out about 7 centimeters. And I think in looking back, I know that I stalled out because I was just sitting in parallel. And so as soon as they broke my water, she also rotated me where I was laying kind of, my lower leg was straight on the bed and my upper leg was on the pillow, kind of bent on the pillow. So I had a really open pelvis, almost like the baby was under me, but I wasn't laying on her. Mm-hmm. And so and that really helped, because at that point it was like, I could feel it through the epidural that I knew I was complete. Like I knew for sure, like she was going to come out soon, but I didn't want to tell anyone because I was so nervous of something turning south that I just kept my mouth shut. And so I sat there with her like on my tailbone, like in my butt for like 2 hours. And I was like, I'm just going to wait for Dr. Cap to show up because I don't want anybody else to know that I want to push, because I don't know how this is going to go.
Right.
So I kept my mouth shut, and then he walks in at 5:30 or 5 something in the morning. And at the same time, one of my best friend's moms is a nurse there, and she walked in, she started her shift too. And I was like, it was like this father the bride moment. The music swells and your favorite people walk in the room. And I was like, oh, come on in. I told Dr. Cap, come on in, best friend. I'm having a baby. And he's like, I just got here. Like, why are you calling me best friend? We don't know where you're at. I'm like, oh no, I'm ready to push. Like, let's do it. And so he was like, all right. And so I pushed 3 times. I think it's because I had taken so long. My uterus had like gotten her just to the right spot. I only had to push 3 times. And it was like this, it felt really gentle compared to my other births. It wasn't like, there wasn't like throwing up. It wasn't like screaming. It wasn't like me, like whatever. It was just like, oh, here's your baby. And so of course I'm like, oh, I did it. Like I had a VBAC and it wasn't horrible. And my body knew exactly what it was doing. And I worked so hard to get to this moment. I am so abundantly proud of myself.
Fantastic.
So
wow.
yeah,
That's a very different birth outcome.
yes. And that was like this, I regained such a sense of like, I can do hard things. What I've gone through in the past only prepared me for this moment. And I am so proud. Like, what can I conquer now?
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I mean, you had done so much work like to get to that point. And of course, like we want the outcome you just had of like, you did it, you VBAC and that validation. But even leading up to that point, you've done a lot of work to just be in the space of even trying again. Because you could have very easily said, nope, I ain't going through that. It's been horrible the last 2 times. How can I minimize it? But you did the work.
Yeah. And I told my husband beforehand, I said, even if this fails, even if I go and I have another C-section, at least I faced my fears.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
and
amazing.
I wanted a physiological birth too. I said, okay, even if this ends in a C-section, I at least want it to start on its own. I know that's better for the baby. I know she's done cooking. I know it's better for me. Like the hormone swell of all of that will just be better if I just let it happen. And even if it ends in a C-section, at least I faced my fears.
Right. And so what was recovery like for this time?
Oh man, I felt so good. It was so different than a C-section. I didn't tear at all. Again, I was just like, felt good. And again, I always had to remind myself, especially after my first one and then my third one, like, okay, slow your roll, girl. You just had a baby come out of your body. Like you don't need to work out again yet. Like, but it was, I had such a sense of gratitude for my body. Like I was just really proud of her, you know, like, good job, girl, you did it. And so I was gentle, but I recovered really well. And even like, the weight gain, I think I gained 22 pounds with my first 2. I think I gained like 25 with my third one, even though I had not really been working out super hard. And again, went back to where I was before, like not super hard. And now it might be genetic, but it might also be the fact that I was trying to eat really healthy. So
right. No doubt, like healthy for sure, but also like you weren't as traumatized.
Yes.
Right? Physiologically as well as mentally, which then is going to slow recovery because there's so much more on your plate to recover from.
Yes. And it was interesting that third baby was a full pound smaller than my other ones. And I think it might have something to do with the stress that I was carrying of my first 2. I didn't really know how to do pregnancy. I was trying to juggle more. And then with this third one, I was just getting into such a different headspace that I was all about like, how can I help her be as whole and wonderful as she can be? And so I was really interested in like downshifting myself. I called it my Zen pregnancy and like connecting with her. It was the first time I had realized like I listened to your stuff and I was like, oh, I need to actually try to connect with this child before she's born. And so I would talk to her, I would sing to her, I would like just sit in the rocking chair and rock her, even though she was in my belly. And so when she came out, she was the most charming, cuddly. We call her like, we're like, Virginia is for lovers, Abby, because she's just such a lover. Like she's so cuddly and sweet. Even now, she's 2.5 now. And she's just the most wonderful little person. And I was like, I wonder how much of that was epigenetic. Like the way I carried her was so different. And then she's just a great little kid. Like and so now every time people want to have a third kid, I'm like, have a third kid. They're awesome.
Totally. Like by the time you have like 8 kids, they'll all be like super easy. Everything we figure it out by then, but
totally. Yeah. I'm going to have all these like really Zen children. They're going to be like so awesome.
Nice. Well then, so let's move to the 4th then. So you had your VBAC and you did have an epidural for that. And so what's number 4 like?
Yeah. So number 4, I got, I had a coronavirus baby, which I wasn't expecting. Again, it was a surprise. And I think actually it was like right at the beginning of all the lockdowns. I think my cycle got thrown off by the stress of like coming home and all that. And so I was like I must have ovulated really early because I shouldn't have been fertile, but I was. And so I got pregnant with her name's Tegan. I got pregnant with her, April of 2020.
Okay.
And the really interesting thing about growing a baby during a pandemic is no one sees you. And so I feel like I was working on this really meaningful project and no one was like checking up on it. And so it felt like I accomplished something huge. And they were kind of like, how'd you do that? Like, where'd she come from? Because like we showed up at stuff like after the pandemic, like, oh, so you had a baby. I'm like, yeah, I grew a baby like in the time that I didn't see you. Like here she is, you know?
Right.
So it was kind of a weird experience because, and I think because of the eventlessness of last year of being home so much, it sort of collapsed the time. So it felt like a really fast pregnancy, even though it was still all 3 of my girls were born at 40 weeks and 2 days. It was the same amount of time, but it just felt like this really fast because I wasn't doing anything. It kind of all just blurred together.
Which it could have been the exact opposite, that it felt like it dragged on forever because you're not doing anything, and it's an extremely stressful time.
Yeah, it was really weird. I think it was because I was like, all right, I'm at home and I'm doing something really meaningful. I am gestating, so let's do this.
And again, you had a pretty healthy pregnancy, like things were doing fine and eventful in that kind of way, in pregnancy way.
It was uneventful. Dr. Cap kept, every time I showed up, he'd be like, you're boring, but I like boring. Like I didn't have any, like
in prenatal appointments, you want to be boring.
Yeah. He's like, you're boring, but we love boring. And so, I didn't have as many appointments because of COVID. So things were just really chill. So I kind of just showed up, was like, hi, Dr. Cap. Hi, let's listen to the baby's heart rate. Oh, your blood pressure looks great. You have any questions? Nope. It's my 4th kid. I kind of got it now. And like, so I was kind of like, okay, good to see you. See you next month. You know,
Right.
It was such a different experience because it's my 4th. I feel like I had come so far that, but again, I was still being really intentional. I saw my acupuncturist. I saw a chiropractor up here. So I could go more regularly because I wasn't down there as much because of COVID.
Right.
I still did hypno babies. I was very consistent about drinking my red raspberry leaf tea. And I also added a workout. It's like a PBS. It's supposed to be an old lady workout, but it's called classical stretch. It's like she's a former ballerina, but she's all about like lengthening. So it's like a mix of like Tai Chi and yoga and barre. And like, so she does some things that are tightening, but not really. It's all about like lengthening your ligaments and all about fascia, which I had never really understood that word fascia until spinning babies and then classical stretch. And so I really started focusing on my fascia and like, what is this like layer of ligament tissue around all of my muscles and bones that is making my labor harder or easier? Like, can I work out according to fascia instead of muscle? Like, what does that look like? So I got really intentional with that and did that like through my whole pregnancy. And I did not do one sit up and I did not do one Kegel for the whole 9 months because I was like, I'm just not going to make anything harder on myself.
Yeah.
And then Spinning Babies did a few like free giveaways during the pandemic that I downloaded. And one of them was all about like jiggling and how jiggling like really helps when you're in labor. And I was like, that's my key right there. Like I need to jiggle. And so when labor started, it started on my due date at night, but I was like, oh dear God, I'm not ready for this. And so like they were coming, but I was like, please, I was totally holding back. Like, please God, I don't want to be in labor. I'm not ready for this yet. And so I was like totally holding back and then they fizzled out in the morning and I was like, oh, thank goodness I'm not having a baby today. Like I was just not there yet.
Okay.
And then they started again that evening. They were probably like 45 minutes apart during the day, but they weren't intense. And I was just kind of like, again, I'm not calling this labor because if I call it labor, then I'm going to have this really long experience and I'm not calling it that.
Right.
And I had gone on a trip once things started opening back up a little bit, like for November, we went to my husband, Scott, his family. And so we took an airplane flight and I felt her go from the front of my body to the back of my body as I was slouching on the airplane. And I was like, darn it, I have a posterior baby. Like freaking, I'm going to have back labor. Like this is going to be tough again. And so when I had those surges, like overnight, I was like, it's just rotating my baby. It's not dilating yet. I'm just rotating and that's okay. And so throughout the day, I was focusing on leaning forward, doing a lot of like opening. I did classical stretch again. I did spinning babies again, like prenatal yoga, all the things I could to create space for her. I did the mile circuit. Like, what can I do to get her to rotate back to my front? Because I want her to come out easily. And so I had, again, like the nighttime came and they ramped up and my husband and I were actually up in the middle of the night. It was January. So we turned on the fireplace. He made himself breakfast because he's like, we're going to the hospital. We're doing this because they were like 6 minutes apart. We're like, let's go. And at about 6 a.m., they just like kind of fizzled out again. And I was like, I'm not going to be mad about this because I know it's just rotating my baby. And so I was just trying to like, if it's doing this, my uterus needs a rest and I'm going to respect that. And so I just decided just to respect when she needed to rest. So this was now 2 days after. So this was January 14th. And I was like, okay, I feel like I'm in this really weird, like limbo. Am I in labor? Am I not? Like, I felt like I was in timeout. Like I couldn't really go that far from home because you never know.
Yeah,
and so I was like, whatever, I'm just going to have a normal day. And so I did classical stretch. I took a shower. I like went to my brother's house and we had a play date with our kids. And then, but like every 30 or so minutes, I'd be like, oh, excuse me for a second. And I would like go in the other room and have like a pretty intense surge. And I was like, hey, they're definitely getting more intense, but they weren't super close together. And so, but again, I wasn't calling it labor because I didn't want to start my mental clock of like, we got to get this baby out. Like where are we at, you know? So I went to his house and then I took the kids home. I took a nap. And during the nap, I was having consistently 18 minutes apart. Like I had my contraction timer, 18 minutes on the dot. Like I would wake up, have a surge. And instead of just laying there or instead of like trying to grit through it, I put one knee, like I was almost like, you know, when people propose, they're like on one knee. Mm-hmm. I did that, but I took my front knee out to the side and I just kind of like side lunged in a kneeling position, like, and I'd count to 10. I'd do like 10 side lunges and switch legs and 10 side lunges the other way. And then that was kind of all through the contraction. And then I would do like a little bit of a belly lift and then like kind of finish out the contraction and be like, all right, cool. got another one done. And then I'd lay back down 18 minutes later, get up and do my like lungy move and my other lungy move. And so then I felt like this, like, oh, I think I just felt her rotate. Like it felt like this, like, aha. And so I finished my nap and I got up and started walking around, and every like 5 minutes they started coming, and I was like, oh, all right, well that worked. And so but I didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't want to get my adrenaline going. And so I just kind of let my kids play. And I would go, there was like this chair at the end of the hallway. I'd walk down the hallway for like half the surge, and I get there and I just do a standing like bounce, 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 bounce. Like I was like trying really hard to like make her, like I was like, okay, jiggle, jiggle, just jiggle. And that really helped me with the like mental headspace of it. Instead of like just riding out a contraction, I'm like, I'm just moving my baby down, like just get the baby down. And so I jiggled the whole labor. Like instead of being like, I'm just gonna be zen and write it out, I was like, yeah, let's go. And so I was just like, it was so weird. It was totally different than my other labors. And so and then I got in the shower and my husband was like, hey, cool, let's see if we can get you in here for like 30 minutes to an hour and then we'll go in the hot tub. And I was like, all right. And I was like, no, I've been doing this for a couple of days. I just want 30 minutes and then we'll go in the hot tub. And he's like, all right. And in my mind, I'm like, I just have to get to 4 centimeters and get an epidural. This is my last kid, right? Like, I don't know, but I'm thinking this might be done. And so if I can just like sleep through the end of it, I would love that. And so I'm like, just get to 4 centimeters. And so I'm like doing my jiggle move. I get in the hot tub. I'm doing my jiggle move there. And he's like, all right, let's go for like 30 more minutes. I'm like, no, 2 more contractions. I'll give you 2 more contractions. I'm done here. And he's like, all right, we'll see how this goes. They might send you home. I'm like, all right, babe. And so I like jiggled my way out of the hot tub, went in, got dressed. And then I had like this really like gentle, like, oh, my uterus is resting right now. It was really weird. It was like this like break. And I was like, oh. And then it sort of ramped up again and we got in the car. Oh, and by the way, during my 3rd labor, it was like middle of the night. My husband like went inside and made himself coffee, and the Keurig takes forever. And I was like, what is he doing? I was like waiting, going, where are you? And so with this one, I like looked at him. I was like, go in the hospital. Don't make coffee. We got to go. And so he like didn't make coffee and we got in the car. And I have learned over my time that if you sit in there in the front seat, it feels so uncomfortable. So instead, I put my left knee on the seat, on the passenger seat, my right hand on the dashboard, and my left hand like resting against the chair. And I just sort of brace myself, and you kind of ride sideways. And so my other foot is on the floor. And that helps because it's not a sitting position. And so I had probably 5 or 6 contractions on the way to the hospital, and kind of that surfer like move thing I was doing, and the bumps always hurt. But I like, you kind of have more control that way. So that worked really well for me. And then we got to the hospital, and he was like, I don't really think we've been doing this very long, because it had only been like 2.5 or 3 hours, which again, compare that to my first labor. Like, I'm crazy to want to go to the hospital that soon.
Right.
I had 2 moments in the car though where I was like, oh, I kind of feel like I need to poop. That's way too early for that. So I like got to the hospital, and he was like, let's just park because I want you to walk a little farther. And so he parked in the parking lot, and he's like got the roller bag, and I like stood up from that and I couldn't walk. I was like shuffling, like I couldn't make my legs go. And he was like, well, he looked at me like, what are you doing? Like, come on. Cause I like, before I was like running in there. I'm like, get me the epidural. Let's do this. And I like shuffled. I'm like holding my belly and like shuffling. And there's like people in the parking lot, cause it was evening. I'm like, oh, hey, yeah, I'm in labor. Yeah. Hi guys. And I like got inside, and the lady, like I had to put a mask on cause it was COVID. So I put a mask on, and she's like, how many babies is this? And I'm like, 4. And I was like super chill, like in this really weird headspace. Like, I know I'm only at 4 centimeters, so let's just whatever, you know, like I was just like, whatever. So she's like, okay. So this time she let my husband sign the papers. They took me in. They're like, okay, you can go in the bathroom and put your gown on. I was like, you're going to see me naked in a second, so I'm just going to change right here. Like, I was so just like, whatever. And she's like, okay, let's check you. And so she checked me, and she's like, you're at, and she took forever. And it always sends me into a surge when someone checks my cervix, because it's like the agitation, I think, of it just like makes me like go. So, so she checked me. It took forever to figure it out. And I'm thinking like 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, please be 4. And she's like, you're at about a 9. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I'm like, where's my husband? He's still signing papers. I'm like, we gotta get him in here. This is like about to go down. Like, and so then I'm like, that's when I was like, do I even want to do it unmedicated? I don't even know if I'm like ready for this. So I looked at her. I was like, so can I still get my epidural? And she was like, we will help you. And I was like, so no? And she's like, you're going to feel all better when that baby comes out. And I was like, well, I know that. Like, and so then she's like,
that's code word for like, no, you don't get it.
Which was a really nice way of saying no.
Super nice
way. Like a very empowering thing. And so she's like, we called Dr. Cap. He'll be here in 12 minutes. And I was like, oh, so they're not going to make me get to 10. Like, this is my 4th kid. My water hasn't broken. So they're like, we're just going to break your water, and you'll probably be ready to push at that point. And I was like, oh, well, if I don't have to ride out another whole centimeter plus the pushing, like I might be able to do this. And so I remember like having this moment between contractions, like, I can't believe this. I'm about to have an unmedicated childbirth. Like, compare that to 6 years ago when I had this little boy who took decades to come out of my body. And now here I am about to have this like 4-hour unmedicated childbirth. Like, I cannot even believe this moment. And so I was like, all right. And so he got there and he's like, hey, and again, I'm like, come on in, I'm having a baby, let's do this. And so he comes in and he was like, he's got these like massive hands. And he's like, all right, let's just try like having me on your side. So I'm on my side and I've only ever had an epidural. So I've only ever pushed on my back and I felt really out of balance. I couldn't get my supporting leg like to be parallel with my higher leg. And I was like, that's weird. And I couldn't try that. So I tried the other side and I like felt weird. And I just couldn't find a good positioning. And in retrospect, because I hadn't done any crunches, I shouldn't have pushed on my back, but that's all I knew. And so I was like, can I push on my back? And he was like, if you want, that's fine. And so I think if I had looking back on it, I think I should have asked him if I could squat, because I think I would have had more movement there. And I've heard that you have a lot more mobility when you're squatting, because again, this whole thing was about like just seeing labor as like moving the baby around, getting space for her. Right. And so, but I was on my back. And so since he's got these massive hands, he just kind of pushed my tailbone out of the way. And that was like gut wrenching. I was like, oh my gosh. And so then he's like, go ahead and push. And so I pushed and I couldn't find it for a few contractions. And then I was like, okay, there it is. And it took me a while to like find the push, but I was so thankful I was wearing a mask from COVID, because I'm sure I was making all kinds of crazy faces, but I was like hiding behind my mask. So I was just like, I'm just going to go for it, like full on go for it. And so I pushed and it was pretty intense. And then, but he was so encouraging. He was like, you know, her head is a little bit twisted. And when you have like your third or fourth baby, they tend to sit higher. And so I'm not worried about the fact that she's not at 0 or +2 right now, because they sit higher and then they just slide right out. And he's like, so all we have to do is once her head's lined up, she's going to come right out. And so he was during like between contractions, he was in there like with his two like pointer finger and middle finger kind of twisting her head, which I was like, gosh, you're amazing. Like, thank you for the support. Like, and I had called him like earlier that when I was having contractions in the middle of the night and was like, Dr. Kapp, what do I do? Like, and he was like, well, I could sweep your membranes, but you don't really want me to do that, do you? And I was like, no, because that's what started the downscale to my C-section, like back in the day. And he's like, so just all day and your contractions are going to start again at night. So he, from the beginning of this one, was just like giving me confidence, giving me support. And so he was like turning her, and then it took about 15 minutes. And then she came sliding out. He got her head out, he got her shoulders out, and he's like, all right, Amy, you should deliver her yourself. And so I looked down and he had turned her so that her shoulders were like right outside of me. And I just grabbed under her shoulders and I pulled her up on top of me. And it wasn't like, I didn't know what to feel. I was kind of like in like major shock, like, holy hell, I just did this like really, really hard thing. And I like did it. And so I like burst into like this, like, it wasn't crying and it wasn't laughing. It was like talking. Like I just talked the nurse's ears. Like, I can't believe I just did that. That was so amazing. Oh my gosh. And I'm sure I just talked for like the next hour, because I was like, I cannot believe what just happened here. And I like looked at Dr. Kapp, I was like, thank you for believing in me. Like, this was such a gift. And to go from this, like, I can never have kids again, this is so horrible, childbirth is awful, to like, I freaking rocked an unmedicated 4-hour birth. I didn't tear. Like, I got up and like, I got ready for bed that night. I took a shower, brushed my teeth, like put on jammies. Like, I didn't want to wear the hospital thing anymore. And I was like, holy smokes. And the girls were like, all the nurses kept coming in like, I heard you just rocked it. I heard you did great. Like, I heard you. And I'm like, I did. I can't believe I did. And like, so it was really good encouragement for me to be like, I'm not broken. Like, I can freaking rock an awesome birth.
Right. You did. I mean, look at that, from 55 hours the first time, C-section, VBAC, you rocked the third one. It was an epidural, but then, you know, you pushing it off like, all right, please let me get to 4. And all of a sudden, like, no, you're at 9. Like, whoops.
Yeah.
Amazing. I love it. I mean, the way you tell this story is just so contagious. It's so fun. And, but, you know, kudos to you. I mean, you did it. I did it. I feel like I can do anything. Beautiful. What would you say, like in our last kind of minutes there, I mean, there were lots of changes you did along the way. Like, as I was listening to your story there, what would you say were like the major things that if a woman listening to this has had an experience like the first time, or has heard your first experience and said, I don't want that you would have them really focus on, or that was the most meaningful for you?
Well, a couple things. So the first thing for me was I got support on Facebook, which that sounds oversimplified, but really having a lot of moms sharing their stories. And then there were some experts in the group that I was in was really helpful. So I joined a VBAC support group, which was helpful. And I'm sure there are natural birth groups or whatever out there that would be really helpful for moms. So having moms, that helped me set my mind on like, okay, there are evidence-based ways that you can do a VBAC, and there's not a huge risk, surprisingly. And so that gave me a lot of confidence. And they were also the ones that encouraged me to get a new provider. And so getting a different doctor really helped me. And I would say every mom needs to have a doctor that they feel supported by. And if they don't have that in their area, find one somewhere else, do the drive, stay in a hotel that week if you need to, like fly to your parents' house if you need to, but find somebody who's on your team. Because if you're not in a situation where you're supported, then it can go downhill really fast. And it's not just hard on you or your baby, it's hard on your heart. And that's just really like, that's so much harder to get over. Yeah. So a good provider, And then going through the like preparation for birth, like training your body. So spinning babies, the download is like $20. It's totally worth it to like know how to do stretches and like work through birth, and to know that there's changes that you can do during birth, like position wise or stretching wise, that will help your baby kind of get into a good spot. So spinning babies, I would say, is crucial. Chiropractic was really helpful for me, because it not only did it make me know that my body was in alignment and my ligaments were good, but it also gave me one more person on my birth team. And that was really encouraging to me, to feel like I had other people rooting for me to do what I knew was hard. And so that was good. And then my acupuncturist was helpful. And if moms are afraid of needles, they're really small. They're really not like scary. Like it surprised me how relaxing it was. Like I would always fall asleep. Spinning babies. So hypno babies was the other one that really helped me get into a good headspace. And I know they have regular hypno babies. I did the VBAC one because I was aiming toward a VBAC, but I think any of that would be really helpful. And I'm a Christian. I come from a Christian background, but it doesn't conflict with my beliefs, because it's not, it wasn't spiritual at all. It was, it's like reprogramming a computer. You like reiterate truth to yourself over and over again, so that your mind can say, yes, I can do this. Yes, I know what I'm doing. And so it was about overcoming fear. It wasn't like there was nothing conflicting with my beliefs about that. So that was actually really helpful for me. And journaling was really helpful. Raspberry leaf was helpful. Dates were helpful. So I just did all the things that I knew were going to make it better. And together it all just went really well.
Right. And you did a lot differently with your pelvic floor and with the tightening there. Yeah.
I definitely I made sure that if I did any workouts that I wasn't doing anything that was tightening. I tried really hard. Like, and if I did a Kegel, I did it all the way in and then all the way out to relax. And so I was getting that full range. I also had started taking, in addition to my prenatals, I started taking magnesium, because I was told that would help my muscles to relax between contractions, which helps with like a more complete contraction. So I really tried to kind of support myself in any way possible, knowing that I was trying something hard, that I'm trying something that my body didn't necessarily know how to do, or that I didn't know how to do before. And so getting to the point I was like, whatever advice you got from me, I'm totally an open book. Whoever's going to help me, like, let's do this. Let's figure out how to make this right. So.
And I mean, you did all of that. I mean, some women would do like one or two of those things. I mean, you just listed off like everything that, as a practitioner, of like, if you want an ideal birth, you would do all these things. And, knowing most people would pick a couple, right? But you went all in. And you got all of the rewards of going all in, of being able to rock VBACs and having unmedicated last time. And just even, I mean, we didn't talk that much about it, but like the healing that you got from the first birth, like the trauma that you experienced the first time, like you allowed those other births, or those other births could be healing rather than further traumatizing.
Yeah. And I had a sister-in-law who had a pretty traumatic miscarriage. And I was saying to her, I think it's the same thing when you have birth trauma. And I haven't had a miscarriage, but I would assume it's very similar. When you're carrying a child after a trauma, there's something very life-giving and healing about the whole pregnancy after that. And so the 9 months that I was carrying my third child, I just underwent such a transformation of like, I am okay, and reiterating truth, like she's okay. I love her and I'm caring for her and I'm going to be okay having her. But I was grateful that I had 9 months to like work through that. And something about that whole process did a wonder in my mind and my soul.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, again, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been a fun listen for me, and to hear it all in amazing details. It was so fun. And your energy is just so contagious, and that you can do it. I think part of your message is that if I can, like, you can too. And hopefully that's what the listeners get from that. If people do have like questions for you, are you willing to like kind of field questions? Is there a place that they can reach out to you?
Yeah. They can reach out to me through Instagram. My Instagram is it's Clean Eating with Amy Bayer. It's all together, one big long word, Clean Eating with Amy Bayer.
And I'll put that link in the show notes so they can just click over. I appreciate that. Like that, not everybody's going to want to, put themselves out there on a podcast, let alone possibly fielding questions. But your story is inspiring. So thank you again for being here to share it.
Yeah, I hope moms take away that they can go from horrible birth to wonderful birth. And it doesn't mean you're broken to have a bad birth. It doesn't mean you always have to have bad births. And it doesn't mean that it always is going to be hard. It might be shockingly wonderful where you talk your mouth off for the next hour after it happened because you're so absolutely shocked.
Right. Well, if number 5 comes around, maybe you can come back and you can share that one as well.
Yeah, you know what? That's the crazy thing about having a good birth. I'm not opposed to having more kids, which sounds totally weird, but yeah, I'm just shocked. God is good.
Well, thank you again, Amy. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And don't forget, I have 2 free offers for both moms and dads. First, for the moms, I have my 40 ways of connecting with your baby during pregnancy that you can get on my website at drjwarren.com/40 ways. That's 40 ways. And for the dads, I have the 9 myths about becoming a dad that is also available on my site at drjwarren.com/9 myths. That's the number 9 myths. So both moms and dads are covered. Go check them out. I hope you enjoy them.